Vice Mayor Lee, you added this item. Please kick us off.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by just saying I've received no campaign contributions or individual donations from union members, either for my campaign for Clover City Council or for the campaign which I lost for State Senate. Just want to make that as clear can be. No money has exchanged hands. No union members have independently donated to my campaign. This was something that came to me out of a sense of moral obligation. And I know we all have different morals, but that's where I come from. The second thing that I want to say and really sort of emphasize, because I know a lot of the hospital administration has brought this up before, but other jurisdictions have considered hero pay ordinances for hospitals. It's just that, just like tonight, when the final vote comes up, or even prior to that, a lot of representatives from administration show up and they scare people, and they use doublespeak to make it seem like they've done something which they have not. As an example, I like to go over three things that we heard tonight. One, we heard that the hospital is paid for childcare. We heard from the workers, many, that was a reimbursement after the fact, after workers basically had no choice but to pay for childcare. If they wanted to work, if they wanted to continue being able to support their families. Secondly, we heard from a number of administrators that as part of the hospital's effort towards hero pay, they paid for hotels. A lot of the stories that I've read in the pandemic have been really intimate stories around essential workers, either at hospitals or supermarkets or pharmacies or other establishments that were deemed essential, being separated from their families for long lengths of time. Having a hotel provided is not a plus. It means that you have been isolated from your family by your job. If you check any of the latest literature in psychology, in social work, or in neuroscience, you will find that social isolation leads to a lot of bad things. Social isolation in the context of a pandemic, where you have other stresses, where your job stresses you out, is a difficult thing to deal with. Lastly, we heard quite a few times that we should not be considering hero pay at all, because it is something that the hospital has already provided. I was taking notes. We had an incredible number of administrators giving public comment, but each time people mention hero pay or reimbursement for childcare, they did not mention the amounts. We've heard from employees tonight that most of what the hospital chooses to call hero pay were requirements that came down either from Los Angeles County or from the state of California, that the hospital chose to euphemistically phrase as hero pay. I wish someone had clarified that. I wish someone either in the admin or on the employee side had gotten more specific about numbers, but the back and forth and the vagueness of it does not convince me that the hospital has indeed already instituted a hero pay policy. It sounds like nurses were successful in a push to get hero pay in Southern California Hospital. But if you've been to the hospital or any hospital, you know that there are a lot more workers. And you know that professions like nurse or doctor are usually in more privileged positions. We've heard people in radiology and other places say that they finally broke down early and bought PPE for themselves because it was initially not provided by the hospital. This was common across the United States. This was not unique to Southern California Hospital at Culver City. What is unique is the ability to do that. That is something that a doctor, maybe a nurse, can do financially. It is often something that is financially out of the reach of their less well-paid workers. I would invite my colleagues to consider that as they consider whether or not to move forward with this zero pay ordinance. I would also like to say, even though today we heard from a lot of the administration of Southern California Hospital, we must keep in mind that the hospital itself is owned by Prospect Holdings. And Prospect Holdings is owned by the private equity firm Leonard Green. I won't rehash what's been said in many, many meetings before, but there is a fantastic article that ProPublica published last year about our hospital specifically and the improvements that were supposed to be done that management said were done, but which were not. This pattern of behavior has been replicated in hospitals across the United States, and I think it's something that we should consider. The other thing I'd like to highlight is that when hero pay has been considered, as it is being considered tonight, it has been outside of the scope of employer-employee contract negotiations. This has no bearing on your negotiations. It might have bearing for you individually, but this is in no way the city wanting to be a part of your contract negotiations. That is between Southern California Hospital, Culver City, and your employees. This is a separate issue. This is a separate issue that takes into account people who, like many of us, over the last year, were scared, but who were scared on a daily basis. Who were scared not only because they knew employees at Southern California Hospital who had contracted COVID and they did not find out until days or weeks later, but also because there is an employee at Southern California Hospital at Culver City who contracted COVID, who went home, who eventually died, and whose wife also died of COVID. Their fear is more pronounced than that of ours. This is a small thing. Money doesn't make up for anxiety. Money doesn't make up for depression. Money doesn't make up for time spent away from your family. And money doesn't make up for what could potentially be post-traumatic stress disorder. But it tells the employees that we're paying attention and that we appreciate the work that they do. In regards to our city employees, those are separate negotiations. And I would ask the administration of Southern California Hospital at Culver City, as they have asked us, to stay out of those negotiations. Those are between the city and our separate employee groups. And you better believe some of the same questions have come up about our public-facing employees and the danger that they have been in for the last year as a result of COVID-19. We acknowledge that danger, and where it is within the city's jurisdiction to do something about it, I think we should compensate our employees for that. I might be alone in this, but I don't think I am on the council, but that's a separate issue. I'd ask you to stay out of that. This is a one-time bonus that would basically just communicate to the workers who are most in danger during the COVID-19 pandemic that we appreciate their service. I won't go into the other things that you can read in the ProPublica article about upgrades needed in the hospital. Those are a separate issue. I've definitely had conversations with union members about those, but that's not what we're considering tonight. We're considering whether or not we're the type of council and we're the type of city that says appreciative and congratulatory words, or if we're the type of city and the type of council that puts our money where our mouth is, that really moves beyond words into action. Words are great. They don't put food on the table. They don't save lives. They don't address over a year's worth of trauma due to the worst pandemic in over 100 years. I, like Mr. Lippman, thought that this particular hero pay or hazard pay ordinance, whatever you might want to call it, would actually be simpler. Because the pandemic was so widespread and so profound that I would be hard pressed to find a friend, a family member, or an enemy who was not touched by it and who was not incredibly appreciative, if they were lucky enough to be in the situation, to see their family member or their friend pulled through because of the efforts of frontline healthcare workers. I think I'm going to end it at that.
Thank you. Councilmember Vera.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Mayor. So this type of questions we have to ask. Why are we the only city in the state, perhaps the nation, that has even considered this? Could it be the potential to litigation, lawsuit? I don't know. But that question really resonates with me. I think we have a duty, a responsibility to our community to protect it from any and all potential litigation, potential lawsuits. And I think that this, unfortunately, will put the city in the crosshairs. That's something I think we should avoid at all costs. At the end of the day, we ask ourselves, what are we trying to accomplish here? What is the end game? That we recognize this one hospital? If we have a moral obligation, as the word said, then that moral obligation should extend to every worker, every hero worker, every frontline worker in the entire city. And it doesn't. It extends to one specific organization. To me, moving forward with this is disingenuous. You know, we have to respect the labor union, the collective bargaining board that said, no, we don't want this. This wasn't part of our discussions. We came to an agreement. Then why, as a city, are we going to intercede and say that agreement that the bargaining board came up with is not valid? We need to change it. I don't know. I think in listening to the comments, a lot of the workers or a lot of the speakers, Captain Scout and Laura Gilbert, Mr. Ramirez, they all stated that things have been already provided to the workers. Now, are we going to single out those workers that have been provided for, and it just doesn't pencil out in I get it. We need to recognize these workers. We need to say, hey, job well done in the light of everything that we were facing. But let's face it, we were all in the same boat. We were all facing these issues. My store was a essential location, so I stayed open to the whole thing. I experienced it. I experienced the difficulty in getting PPE equipment, gloves, masks initially, and still now the charges are astronomical, especially for gloves. It's insane. And so I can only imagine what hospitals and other organizations have to go through. I will keep it brief. I cannot support this. I think it's disingenuous moving forward with it. I think we have so many other workers, some of the frontline workers in the city that deserve the same. Maybe we can, give a city accommodation to all the frontline workers at the hospital in place of this. Yeah, that doesn't do a whole lot in terms of, as Vice Mayor Lee said, putting money on the table. But I think by all the comments, they were compensated for. And I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor. I can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Eriksson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, since this is the second time this is up, more or less, I tried to learn a little more about the issue. It hasn't changed my base position. I don't believe that the city should get involved in these issues. It's outside our purview, really, to pick one company or one specific group within our city and provide them with this compensation that is not money out of our pocket, but out of the hospital's pocket. I think we have to realize that the Brockman Hospital was losing money when this new operator came in, and they have slowly worked on improving and turning the hospital around. And I think we as a community should be very, very grateful for those efforts. And I also know that every hospital in California suffered financially greatly during COVID-19 and have serious financial issues going into the next year now. And so how do I know that? Well, as I told you before, my son is an ER doctor, and during the COVID, I probably was on the phone with him 3 times a week, talking about a lot of different issues with relating to the pandemic and getting his input. But one thing that became clear after a few months was that the hospital were losing money like crazy because there was no one doing any type of elective surgery. And that is sort of an important revenue stream for a hospital. And instead, the hospitals were full of COVID patients because they prioritized and had to deal with those issues, right? But they were losing money, hand over fist, all over the state. So the federal money that came in is not generating any profit. It's actually covering up for those losses. And I'm not sure from the hospitals my son works at that they even covered the full sort of cost of what they lost and what they had to spend extra. So I don't think we should say that the Southern California hospital is profitable. so they have enough money to do this. I don't think that is correct. And therefore, we're putting another $2 million at least on them. And of course, as any company would do, is you can't sort of just print money. You have to earn them somewhere. So they will then take that money from something else. And one thing is that the hospital is in the middle of a renovation, improving a lot of earthquake safety and building new facilities and departments, upgrading them. And then it's going to be $2 million less for that. That's how a company works. It has to come from somewhere. And I don't know if that's to the benefit of the community. I think our community actually would benefit from seeing this renovation and the new facilities that they are in the process of starting or have started. That is something we will benefit from. They will, for instance, have plans of building a whole new ER department that's going to be up to snuff, state of the art, and be larger than the current one. That is valuable for our community. Very valuable. And I don't think we should take $2.5 million away from those kind of projects. I think it's sort of a little misguided, because the hospital, as I stated, they have provided extra pay and services and help and so on, and to the employees. So if we're going to do this, as I said the last time, then we should at least let the hospital discount out what they already have contributed, right? I think that's fair. And then I think that we should also consider that being first in this, or being the only one in doing this, might feel good, but it will expose the city to a lawsuit. It's pretty sure that will happen, and then we're going to have to spend money on defending ourselves. And with the grocery workers, there's a number of cities involved. Here, we would be alone. And we also, the budget we dealt with, we have a structural deficit. It's not like we have extra money to play with. We used quite a lot of money out of our reserves to just balance out the last year and going forward. So this will increase our expenses. I think it's highly likely that we will be sued for this. And I don't think that's really a good decision by the council to get into something that will generate lawsuits unnecessarily. And we also have a lot of other workers who are frontline workers for a lot of different professions, and we don't deal with them. And the question is, why are we just focusing on this specific employer, only one in our city? For me, that's odd. There are other healthcare workers in our city. There are urgent care. There are doctors' offices where COVID patients also went to, right? So, and I understand the worry that people who worked in the hospital area had, because, as I said, my son was an ER doctor. He constantly diagnosed COVID patients and were exposed probably here and there, and had to take a lot of precautions. It is a work in a hospital is sometimes a risk endeavor, even that there is so many precautions. But even coming in as a patient, right? You risk to get a staph infection. There are inherently risks when you go to a hospital, because there is stuff going on in a hospital that are risky. So this was an extreme situation, but also it was manageable. And now we see we are coming out of this. And also, even the regular flu, creates some of these emergencies, right? 3 years ago, a lot of hospitals were fairly full with flu patients when we had the big flu outbreak. And my son tells me that even last year early, one of the nurses working with him got the flu and actually died. So, you know, it happens. Shouldn't happen. And there is a lot of precaution being taken all the time. It shouldn't happen, but it happens. There is an inherent risk in the work in a hospital. And I think the hospital has tried to compensate in a reasonable way for those risks and try to accommodate their employees for their needs. So I don't think we should step into this, especially not being the only one. It's you know, a little Culver City with a deficit is then, you know, sticking our head out. I don't think that's good. So as the last time this was brought up, I will not support it because I think it's not in our main interest. I would rather see the hospital use this money to quicking up and updating the upgrade that they're currently doing. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember McMorrin.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank everyone who spoke tonight and staff for bringing this back and for the report that was made. I'm going to try to be brief given the hour and our agenda. As you all know, my personal philosophy and one that I centered throughout my campaign is to be to consider policy, thinking about those who are closest to the harm. And my refrigerator just started making noise, so apologies for that if it's coming through here. Intrinsic in this conversation, and many conversations that we have, is, you know, the conversation about who is having power, who is having access to resources, risk, harm. And to me, it's very clear there is still an ongoing risk. There was clearly, you know, a terrific loss, terrific harm, not only that workers bore witness to, but there is still an active risk. So that to me, I'm very happy to hear that there are no active cases. No one can predict the future. I am hopeful and prayerful that we are on the other side of this, and again, encouraging everyone to go and get vaccinated and to wear your mask and to be as safe as possible. But for folks who continue to be on the front lines to this, continue to sacrifice and have suffered incredible harm, not just to them, but also to their families. I think that this ordinance is for a finite period of time. I'm particularly interested in lower paid workers here, ensuring that, you know, folks who are taking the laundry, changing bedpans, you know, doing the things that we heard directly from workers that everyone did not receive additional aid. I'm not sure how aid was delivered, but it was very clear from comments this evening that how representatives were sharing that aid had already come, or, you know, this is a moot point. We heard directly from workers that that was not the case. I could continue, but my main point here is this is a small thing that we can do, and I fundamentally believe it is the right thing to do. It is within our purview to act. It is in our purview to address, you know, ongoing risk and respond to that. I know it is a hard thing to raise your hand or stick your neck out, but when you're doing the right thing, it's the right thing. And, you know, this might open us up to, you know, things down the road, but we are doing, hopefully, we will have the opportunity to do the right thing, show up for folks who, as we've heard tonight from community members who are not workers, or, you know, that they count on, you know, this hospitals in our community to provide a service, and we want them to be safe. We want them to be safe, and I'm in support of this. It was a tough decision, but I land on supporting folks who are closest to risk and harm, and there's an ongoing risk, and that's where I land. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. I share Councilmember McMorrin's views, basically endorse that, and I just want to highlight that this is, my consideration is really looking forward, and it was not without significant consideration and thought, it really assessing everything and thinking it over, recognizing, this is not an easy issue, but ultimately, looking forward, this is not totally over. In addition to the findings that we've spelled out in the draft resolution, the people who come in who are not vaccinated still present special risks because it's become a sort of an ideological thing to get vaccinated, which is really unfortunate. And I hope that people will change that view and go ahead and get vaccinated so that we can truly emerge, so that we can say that this is behind us. But for the next, very limited few weeks, premium hazard pay advances the aims of protecting the health and welfare of our essential hospital workers and their families in our community. It recognizes and compensates them for the risks that they continue to face every day, including the pent-up demand for services and sort of the additional trauma that we hear that's impacting them at work right now. It'll support stable incomes among those hospital workers, and it'll promote job retention at a time when a lot of people are looking to leave the industry, and where if we require this additional support right now, it may lead to I think it's likely to lead to a more stable and more dedicated workforce right here in our community. So with that, I move to just look at our language to introduce the ordinance as attached to the agenda, establishing premium hazard pay for on-site hospital workers at covered hospitals.
Lee seconds.
I have a motion by Mayor Fisch and a second by Vice Mayor Lee to introduce the ordinance on first reading. How do you vote? Councilmember Vera?
Nay.
Councilmember McMorrin?
Aye.
Councilmember Eriksson?
No.
Vice Mayor Lee?
Aye.
Mayor Fisch?
Aye.
That motion passes, 3 ayes, 2 nay. Nay from Council members Eriksson and Vera.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, members of the public, and thank you, staff. We'll move directly to A2.